Hello, good morning. Great to see you here. My name's KIRSTY Lang, and it is my absolute honor to be in conversation today with Lydia Cacho, who is one of Mexico's most famous journalists, and I think probably one of the bravest women I have ever met. And very beautiful, quite right. Lydia and I actually met we were just discussing this in Mexico, in Querétaro, at a book festival almost 10 years ago. And one of the things I remember at this book festival was meeting this woman in her 50s who was carrying around a file of papers and approaching any journalist she could find and saying, "My daughter disappeared. This is unfortunately a very common story. And I'm desperate. I've collected all these documents. I don't know what's happened to her. Can you help me?" And I then passed on the file to Lydia, one of many files and was struck both by the desperation of this situation, but also the compassion with which Lydia treated this woman and all the women that she deals with. Her exposés of violence against women and children, and her investigations into child trafficking, and she's been investigating this phenomena for 25, 30 years, has made her a target for some of Mexico's most dangerous criminals. She's been kidnapped, she's been tortured, she's received more death threats than she can count, and for the past few years she has been forced into exile because it is too dangerous for her to stay in her home country. She cannot go back to Mexico where her family is. This is a huge sacrifice, and this is the sacrifice made by a woman who has, on her own, who has taken on the combined force of the Mexican cartels, corrupt politicians, and the business networks that support them. So it's a real honor to have you here in Vienna, Lydia. Let's start with a bit of your background, just to sort of situate you. You were born in Mexico City to a father, an engineer father, a mother, a psychotherapist, and a feminist, which is important. You became a journalist when you were 23. When did you start specifically writing about violence against women and children? What was the journey that led you to this subject?
Well, it has. Hello, thank you for having me here. I'm so glad I'm in Vienna. I guess I understood that women's issues were really important when I was 14, 16, and my mom was working with young women, with poor women around Mexico City, and she used to take me and my brothers and sisters to work with her. And I did understand that if you don't listen to women and children, you don't understand your own country. So I guess that formative period of my life is what kind of naturally brought me to this kind of journalism, because the first piece of journalism I did was covering some art show in Cancun, Mexico, where I lived.
Yeah, I should say you moved from Mexico City to the Cancun, which is a beach resort. We'll come to that later. A paradise for tourism.
Exactly, a paradise created by the Mexican banks and the American businessmen, kind of like Trump. And so that was the first piece. And then the second one, my editor sent me to the Mayan area, because this is Cancun, just to situate you in case you don't know it. It's in the Yucatan Peninsula, which is the southeast of Mexico. It borders with Guatemala and Belize, and that's really important because it's a border with Central America, and it's where all the immigrants and people that are running from violence from all over Latin America crossed before. Chiapas, which is one of the other states, border states. So I moved there, and Cancun was the paradise built by bankers. But right when I were down south, there were all these Mayan groups, indigenous groups, that were expelled from that side of the Yucatan Peninsula in order for it to look beautiful, right? So they didn't need the indigenous people there. So all these women and children stayed by themselves because all the men moved up north to Cancun to build the empire, right? To build these amazing, rich, big hotels, five-star hotels for the international chains. So anyway, he sent me there, and it was very funny because the question from my editor was, you go there, Lydia, and you ask women how the tourism in Cancun has improved their lives. And I'm like, sure, I will. So I did go, and I did ask the question, and they just laughed in my face, and they said, listen, you come with me. So they gather together in the Central Park in this little town, Mayan town, and they call all the women, and they sat me down. They gave me the lesson of my life as a young journalist, reporter, and they started talking about domestic violence, like how their husbands started drinking a lot because they were being overworked and enslaved in the construction industry up north in Cancun. And they were, once they were getting home, they were really violent to them. They were like tired and angry, and how some of the children were being abused by the priest, by the local priest, Catholic, in the Catholic Church. So I came back to the newspaper, and I have this piece. And my editor was, what the hell are you doing? You don't want to get this. This was the main newspaper in Cancun. And he said, we don't want to get the head of tourism angry at us. And I said, why? And he explained that obviously they were paying a lot of money for publicity in the newspaper. But anyway, the thing is, there were not a lot of journalists back then there. And I am a really good writer. And he knew it. And he didn't have any other, piece to run, so he ran it. And it became like one of the most read pieces in the newspaper. Back then when everybody was reading on paper. And so he understood that I was an asset for the newspaper, even though they hated me and I was a crazy feminist and I shouldn't write about women and all that, but they kept publishing my pieces whatsoever. So, and then, yes, the tourism industry started getting angry at me, but,
So this listening to women and children in Cancun eventually leads you to writing a book in 2004 where you expose a prostitution and child pornography ring in Cancun, which implicates the tourism industry. So not just organized crime, but also members, if you like, respectable members of the business community as well. And this book, The Demons in Eden, Eden being Cancun, the tourism Eden. I mean, looking back at that, what were some of the, if you like, hardest truths that you uncovered, that you revealed to the public through that book?
Well, I guess there were a lot of things that we did not know back in 2003. Almost nobody understood cyber violence, what we already know. A lot of people are talking about it. And in order to let me go back a little, but I work as a journalist, as an investigative reporter from 2003. I'm sorry, from 1987. And the year 2000, I decided with a group of my friends, journalists and activists, to open a shelter. That's really important to mention, because we opened a high security shelter to protect the women and children that were being abused by all these tourists that were pedophiles, and by locals, and by husbands that wanted to kill their wives, and by obviously incipient, back then, organized crime. Especially narco-traffickers that were coming from Colombia, and then the Mexican ones, the Mexican cartels. Back then, it was like we were learning everything that we already know, right? So when we opened the shelter in the year 2000, and then I had a TV program also talking about all these issues. And was still for my peers, my colleagues, all the journalists, kept saying I was a crazy feminist and I was going nowhere, and it didn't make any sense because nobody was going to be interested in what I was writing about, because it was crazy, right? Who wants to listen to children? Who wants to believe children if they said they were abused? So anyway, because I had a TV program, one woman called me one day and she said that she really needed help. She has a friend that needs help with the children. So I go to her house, and there it is, this 40-year-old woman in absolute distress, telling me the story of her children being abducted by a network of really rich businessmen that were doing child pornography with their kids. And the police knew it, and the children were at the police station, so everything was so complicated, so unbelievable. But I did believe her, and I went and investigated, and we rescued some of these kids. And some of these children were being abused since they were 4 years old. And 4 to 13 was the media of age of the abused children. So they told me their stories. We protected them and protected some of the mothers, because these guys, once they knew I was doing the investigation, started sending death threats to me. They tried to buy me off, and they couldn't, so they sent death threats. And anyway, it got complicated. But I kept going. And the thing is, I started finding this, and all of a sudden I got stuck, because one of the little girls, 11-year-old, told me that when they were abusing her, all these men, all these rich men and everything, there was the owner of the hotel that was making videotapes with a video camera, right, back then, 2003. And that then he was putting all these videos in a little, she didn't even know what a computer looked like. And she said, you know, a little apparatus that looks like a box, and you open it, and he had these videos there. And he was sending it to someone, and I don't know what that means. So I started investigating. I started asking questions to police in Mexico, in the US, in different countries, and they were like, that looks like the pedophile networks of the deep web, but nobody really can investigate that. It's really expensive. So anyway, a long story short, I found a hacker, and I asked him to teach me, and he did. He was very young, and he did help me, and I learned, and the first day we got in there, because he did it, I didn't the first time, and we got there, we started seeing all these short videos of these guys that I was investigating, but from other guys, from Thailand to the US to Germany, sharing all these videos and photos. What we all know now, back then, it was a big surprise. So when these hackers saw it, he said, I'm gonna help you get them. Let's do it. So we started taking out all the information and printing some of it. So we had all this evidence, and I couldn't sleep for like 3 weeks, and I was sick of my stomach, and I didn't know how to handle that, because nobody knows how to handle that. And also, obviously, my teacher, hacking teacher, was also very sick. I mean, he was...
It's traumatizing watching these images.
It's traumatizing. Because it's awful that you listen to a little girl, a little boy telling you this story, but once you see the evidence, the actual evidence, and this guy celebrating how they got a 10-year-old girl and a 12-year-old girl or a 10-year-old boy, and talking about their virginity and how they enjoyed it, and things that were like really distressing. Yeah, it changed your life forever. I guess, yes, you cannot erase it from your mind. Absolutely, it's awful, it's tremendous. But it also made me make a pact with all these children, right? I was like, okay, I'm gonna make sure for the rest of my life that people understand what it means when when a little boy or girl tells an adult that she or he was abused, right? So that was like the beginning, and then some of the girls started saying, "Oh no, he threatened us if we said something." because he is a friend of someone that is all the time on TV. And they said the first name of this guy, and I started writing all the names, and then I went into it, and then I saw the senator, the leader of the main party, the pre-party in Mexico, and I took all their pictures. And I show it to them. And they were like, oh yeah, he was in a dinner party. He was in the party at the hotel. So they started recognizing these men, really, the Ministry of Interior, the chief of the judicial police, and a lot of rich businessmen, international businessmen that were living in Cancun. So this was not your narco mafia, your typical guy. These were like really fancy, rich entrepreneurs and senators and governors, and 3 governors actually. So I started finding all this, and I decided we have to do something more about it, aside of obviously protecting the children. So I asked one of my friends, there was a lawyer, I said, can we get them? And she's like, are you crazy? I'm like, yeah, let's get them. And she goes like, okay, let's try it, right? So we did.
And then they tried to get you.
Oh, they still are trying to kill me. Yes, we...
And you tell us about the tapes that emerged a couple of years later, about the tapes between the local governor and...
Yes, when I started finding a lot of this information, what I did on my TV program back then was I started inviting all these experts from around Mexico and Latin America that I needed for them to tell the public that was watching my TV program how important post-traumatic stress syndrome was for all these children, and how important it is to explain how sexual exploitation and child pornography works, and why these men are doing it, and when they are sociopaths, but they are not necessarily psychopaths. So I brought criminologists and stuff like that. So we started doing this, and then I started getting all these death threats. So every time they issue a death threat, I went to the media and I said, these guys want to kill me, and I said all their names, right? And back then, this wasn't very usual in Mexico. I mean, journalists would say, oh, somebody wants to kill me, and they were really afraid, mainly men, and they wouldn't dare to say it's the governor and his name is blah, 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 or it's a senator, but I did. So they didn't know what to do with that. Because it was like, oh my God, one of them said it's not true, and then I showed the tape, so I went to the police, national police, and I placed cases against all of them, legal accusations against all of them. I didn't stop there. I didn't stop at telling the press. I went for a legal process against each and every one of them. And then the police kept telling me, Mrs. Cacho, are you here again? They haven't, and I said, yes. And he said, well, you know, death threats are not a crime. And I said, no, so I'll be back when I'm dead, right? So I can prove that they killed me. And I asked another friend, lawyer friend, and I said, can we change the law? Can we make death threats to journalists, you know, a crime? And he said, let's try it. I said, why not? So we gathered together with NGOs and other lawyers, and everybody started doing things. And so the one good guy, there's always good guys, obviously, one good guy in the federal police, specialized in organized crime, he said, we must right now, because you're accusing the leader of the pre-party that wants to be the president, you're accusing governors, you're accusing the Minister of Interior, you're accusing the general prosecutor. We need to put some bodyguards, special bodyguards, like from the army, to protect you. So I had 3 bodyguards, and every time they tried to kill me, because it happened a few times, they were not able to. And then finally, I published a book, Demons of Hidden, with all their names. Back then, most journalists used the names of the children, if they were talking about children, or women, right? It's like they killed some women in Ciudad de Juarez, and they published all the names of the victims, violating every human rights of the victims. The same thing with children. Or saying child prostitutes because they were 13-year-old girls. And I kept saying, this is not right, this is a violation of human rights of children. We have to change the narrative in journalism. But people kept thinking I was crazy. And what we did was, I decided to publish the book with all the names of all the politicians and all the businessmen. And they tried to stop it. They threatened the leader of the boss of the Random House Mondadori, which was my editorial house, my publishing house. And they said, Lydia, do you have evidence? And I said, yeah. And they said, they're going to sue us. And I said, okay, can you protect me? Can we defend it? You know, the publishing house have the evidence. And they said, yeah, let's do it. So we went for it. And then as they couldn't stop me that way, 4 months later, after I presented the book, and it was like a big thing, and everybody in Mexico was talking about it, they sent some policemen, one governor that was involved in this, sent a group of policemen to illegally arrest me. They kidnapped me, they tortured me for 24 hours. They illegally took me to jail. Originally, they were gonna kill me, but they couldn't because all the media knew when I was taken. So I was taken to prison, and instantly, this female judge that was bought by this mafia, she sentenced me to 7 years in prison for using the real names of the criminals. So it was a defamation case against the journalist for telling who the criminals are. So I had the right to write the book, but without the names of the criminals, right? I could tell all the names of the victims, but not of the criminals. So anyway, after 1 year, I won the case. So obviously, I didn't spend the 7 years in jail. And then I said, I'm going to go after each and every one of them. So I started doing that. And I'm still doing it after 20-something years. So I started putting on some of this. Mainly, for me, the big change for Mexico was the leader of all of them, the one that was getting the girls from different countries, Colombia, El Salvador, the US. They had to be virgin, they had to be 13 or 12 years old, from different countries. From Eastern Europe, he was bringing them and charging $4,000 only for bringing them, aside of all the paperwork. He got arrested thanks to my book in the US. And then the judge in the US said, we have him, but nobody can, testify against him. Are you willing to? And I said, sure. He said, are you aware they're might kill you? And I said, yes. So I started testifying, they arrested him, and then they finally sentenced him after many, many years of fighting against him and the mafia. They gave him the longest sentence ever in Latin America, and probably a lot of countries in the world, which was 113 years for child pornography. So thanks to that, we changed the law, and we created a law against child pornography, and people started believing what we now know, that there's a lot of child pornography made by the big tech giants.
Now, is it true, I'm going to slightly move on to some other investigations that you do, that they're all connected, they're usually to do with women and children, that you dressed up as a nun in order to go into mafia-controlled areas of Mexico City, and how did that work out?
Oh, it was fun. Yes, that was a long time after all this thing happened, all the kidnapping and everything. And then after I went through a lot of therapy and I won cases and I kept going with my life, one day I said, I need to go back to like everyday journalism and do something bigger. And I was traveling around the world, right? And all the people, I mean, women and men all over the world, I'm not exaggerating, in Sweden, in Italy, everywhere, in Kyrgyzstan, after I presented my books or talk about this and gave a conference on these issues, some people came to me and said, listen, my child, little girl, my little boy disappeared, can you help me? And I thought, there's something going on and nobody's writing about it. I need to explain, because the question of every parent in the world is, how the hell did they take her or take him, right? How? Because the police is like, they don't vanish. Children around the world don't vanish. So I told my husband, okay, I'm gonna do exactly what I did with Demons of Eden, but around the world. And he goes like, oh, good. You want more enemies? And I'm like, no, I don't, but I have the knowledge now, And back then, I already studied criminology and all this stuff, so I understood more things, and I had all these great sources around the world. So I made a map of all the countries, like Asia, Central Asia, Israel, that was buying organs for their own children in Central Asia, and Latin America, the UK, etc. So I made this map, and I spent 5 years traveling around the world, following the mafias from the Yakuza to the Mexican cartels to the other. And I did it talking to victims, and they explained how they took them, for example, from Venezuela to Mexico, from the US to Japan. So after one victim told me the story, I did follow the trail all the way, the money laundering, the traveling agents, everything. So when I was doing this book that is called Slavery, Inc., and it's also in German, by the way, translated in German, I was one day trying to investigate this network of organized crime in Mexico City that is very powerful because one of the biggest cartels is running it still, but it was running it with little girls back then. Now they don't do it with young girls. So I discovered that was it, and I talked to some women that used to be in the sexual industry there, sexually exploited, called prostitutes in Mexico back then. And they had an NGO helping girls, getting them out of this awful industry. So I talked to them and I said, how can I get in there and see the girls? And they said, no way. I mean, you're in every newspaper. Everybody will recognize you. How can you go in, right? You're not a man. You cannot go as a client, like most male journalists. They just go in and they say they want to have sex and that's it, right? Not suspicious. But me, no way. So anyway, she said, there are this group of nuns that go every week to confess the women and to talk to the Johns, to the exploiters, and they sell them cookies and all this. And I went to see the nuns, and I'm like, listen, I'm Lydia Cacho. They go like, yes, we know. And I said, can you help me? I want to, infiltrate. And they go like, what? No, okay. So we had this big discussion, and then one of them gave me one of the habits. And it was very funny because most of them were really short. And so I tried the habit and it looked like a skirt, and I'm like, no way, I'm gonna pull this. So I had someone making me like a habit with the whole thing. And it was very weird. I mean, I went there with two of them, and they were like, oh, don't worry about it, Lydia. They were such tiny women. They were like, don't worry, just God is protecting you. And I'm like, okay, I'm an atheist, but I will believe for a day. Of course, because I have my rosary and everything they did, right? And they told me how to hold the rosary. I never held the rosary. And they told me that every time I saw one of these exploiters, one of the Johns, I had to do this, right? Give him like a
benediction.
Yeah. And I wanted to use another finger, but I didn't. And so I did these things, and I went like, yeah. And no, they didn't look at me. And it was fascinating because I even thought I'm gonna, instead of keeping, taking my mustache off, I said I'm gonna leave, a little hairy thing here so I look more natural, and I did. So it was very cool. And they didn't know, but once I got in there and we got all the way upstairs, I saw these little girls, 7, 8, 10-year-olds. Oof. And the rest of the women in the building were, adult women from 21 to 50 or even 60 years old that were, like in this industry forever. Anyway. But the little girls were in cages. And what I investigated with this book is I went to the spy shop in LA, and I bought all these tiny cameras, like an earring or different cameras. So I had my camera, and I had some photos taken of these little girls in the cages. Like, this in Mexico, they use these big cages to put the clothes to dry. So neighbors won't steal yours, but also it doesn't fly off to the rest of the city. So those were the cages in Mexico City. And then after that, I made they arrested these men and they rescued the kids. And then the next thing I did, I infiltrated in certain VIP clubs where sexual exploitation was being taking place in Colombia, in Dominican Republic, and in Mexico. So I had to take some classes to pole dance and all that.
So you posed as a pole dancer and a prostitute in order to infiltrate.
Fortunately, I'm old, right? So back then I was 40 something. I'm 62, so I was 40 something, yeah. So I had this friend that worked in cinema, and he made the whole persona of a prostitute. So I learned to dance and this, and I had to dress and green eyes, because in some of these VIP places they had my photo in the entrance because they knew I was investigating them. So I had to change my whole.
Change the color of your eyes.
Yes, with this. Oh, it was really hard. It was the hardest part. That and dancing in the pole.
And pole dancing's quite difficult.
Oh, it was so. I mean, if you do it not just to exercise and look good, but if you do it properly, so people will believe that you belong or used to belong to that industry, because I'm way too old to belong to that industry. It's like if you're 24, you should just retire because you're too old. At 24 now, right? Back then, now it's worse. Now it's 21. So the ages are going lower and lower because of the demand of the clients. So anyway, I did learn, and I had all these bruises forever in my legs. And then one day I just really learned, and then I went in and I did some, of these numbers. And then when these clients started talking to me and saying, hey, it's not a joke what I'm going to say, but it was one time in Colombia. It's in the book. This is an anecdote, but there was a German guy and a Spanish guy and a British guy talking to me, and like in the bar, and I always pay the barman to give me something that looks like a vodka tonic, but it's only tonic water, right? So and they were just talking to me and going, hey, you can still play tricks. I'm like, no, I'm too old. I'm just here for the just celebrate the old times with my pals. And they go, no, I could hire you. And I'm like, no, I'm retired. I'm married to the owner. I was like, oh my God, I'm not gonna do this. But thanks to that, I did have my video cameras, and I could tape all the interviews with all these guys. They didn't know I was interviewing them because they were there abusing young women, 15 and 16-year-old young women, these VIP clubs. So one thing that I learned when I was writing the book is I dress up as a nun and I dress up as a prostitute. And in both cases, I was not a dangerous woman, because they are both sides of the spectrum of being a woman that is not important and non-threatening to men. So I was the safest in my life. So next time I will dress as a nun. When they tried to kill me. Now,
there's so many stories to ask, and I've got a lot to cover, and I know there'll be some questions, so I'm going to just sort of briefly, but it's very difficult to do briefly, but another thing that you investigated, and I want to bring it up because it's a very famous case, was the disappearance of literally hundreds of young women from the border area between the United States and Mexico, in Ciudad de Juarez. And I remember we spoke about that when we met in Mexico for the first time. And what you were describing was the political and economic circumstances that allowed this to happen. This dislocation with the building of large amounts of factories, of internal migration. Just give us what were those circumstances that allowed hundreds of young women to be disappeared and killed in this one area, and nothing was done. Nobody was held to account.
Yeah, it was back in 1994 when nobody was talking about these issues almost anywhere. Some good friends that were doing great journalism in Ciudad Juarez had death threats by the organized crime leaders that were running all the clubs and the prostitutes there. And And she said, Lydia, somebody has to come and cover this because all these girls are disappearing. And we don't know how to investigate it. So I went with two other friends, female journalists, and we started investigating. And what I did is I went to all the houses of all the women that claimed that their daughters had disappeared, and they all had a pattern. But it was Esther Chavez-Cano, the leader of one NGO, an amazing woman. She's dead, but she was incredible. She was one that started writing in one book. She had a notebook and she started writing. She was an accountant, right? But she was helping this woman, and she started writing the names of the mothers, the names of the girls, and how they look like, and saving all the photos to help them in her NGO. And all of a sudden, when I went to see her, she showed me these notebooks, and I started mapping out everything. And I'm like, oh my God, all these girls look alike. And they're pretty much the same age. And they have long hair, and they have darker skin. There's a pattern here. We have to investigate the pattern. And the police just dismissed us and said no. So we started investigating it. And the thing is that poverty in many, many areas of the rest of Mexico drove all these families, mainly women with girls, to go up north to work in these maquiladoras, or this maquiladoras.
Factories.
The factories.
Like the clothing factories.
Clothing factories where they enslave women because they work like for 12, 14 hours. They pay them like really low wages. They don't let them out.
This is producing cheap goods to go over the border to the United States.
What you see in China, that China is becoming that, well, the big slavery country. Now we saw it in northern Mexico. And some of the owners of these places were some of the guys that I later caught in 2003 with the pornography networks. So this is really interesting how it works. So that was it. There were there were a few girls that appear dead in the desert with certain, the kind of the way they killed them for the police. There were signs for the criminologists at the police that it was organized crime or something like that. So they didn't want to touch it, right? And then we started discovering the whole thing. If you want to understand the entire story and how all the political networking and protection and the police and everything, you can listen to a podcast I made from 1994 to today, and it's called The Red Note, and it's in every platform. So
Red Note.
The Red Note. So it's 10 chapters of the whole story. So I want
that. I want to spool forward to the present. For the first time, Mexico has a female president.
Yeah.
Claudia Sheinbaum. Do you think her gender could influence how she has it in any way, how she approaches gender-based violence? And do you have any hope that things will get better now you have a woman president?
I think it's good that we have a woman president. The thing that is not good is that her party is full of, gorillas that are exactly the same politicians that we always had before, misogynist pigs and corrupted politicians and everything. So the system and most of the senators and congressmen that are in sustaining this political party, Morena, are exactly the same ones that just moved from the pre-party to Morena. So this is the same game of everyone, all the time. So this is really difficult for her to pass some bills and some laws that are important for women and children, on one hand. On the other hand, is that she claimed to be a feminist ever since I remember. I met her like 20 years ago. She's a scientist. So I think it's good. She's an intelligent woman. She's a scientist. She's very pragmatic. She's not as ignorant as López Obrador because he's incredibly ignorant. And she is very bright, which helps. She knows a lot about public policy and international affairs, which will be really important for the next 5 to 10 years and to confront Trump. So there she's doing a good job. In terms of economical stability in Mexico, she's doing a good job. But regarding women and children's rights, she's not doing a good job. And it's a shame, and she's betraying women in Mexico, and she should, be accountable for that. So we're trying to put a lot of pressure into asking her to recognize how badly it is. Sometimes she does in her press conferences in the morning, and sometimes she just goes like, oh, especially with violence against children, she's going like, no, it's not as bad as you're saying, but it is as bad as we're saying, because we're documenting it. Even though I'm not there, I'm still working with all this network of activists and people that work with children and women. So, yeah, she has to be pressured to do it.
I mean, I noticed during in the last half an hour we've been talking, several times you've mentioned, NGOs doing great work on the ground in Mexico. Presumably, like NGOs working in this area all over the world, they have been hit by the destruction of USAID money. So what impact is that having on the work that's done with these very vulnerable communities? And also, in the meantime, since you've been investigating this, the power of big tech has become even greater. And now with AI, even more difficult to regulate and so on. So.
Yes, I think that's really important. I mean, even though you might think I'm crazy, that I might be, but we can tackle this. Absolutely, I'm absolutely convinced, and I have evidence to demonstrate this. I'm not just saying it because I want to make you feel good and I want to say, oh, we can save the world, but we could, if we wanted, and if people that have the tools, the proper tools in academia, in certain governments, would join hands, they would tackle this. The thing is, I'm going to give you a very quick example of how we can tackle these guys. Is when we started investigating this, if you read Demons of Eden, published in 2003, you see like an entire chapter where I'm explaining how this is working. And if we don't do anything, this technology will grow, and this organized crime, and the pedophiles and everyone will just be in charge of the technologies in order to commit their crimes and be almost invisible to authorities, because authorities are always really slow, and obviously organized crime and technology goes really fast, and the authorities go really slow. So the example I can give you for something that I'm investigating right now to explain how we could do something about it and not leave you depressed with my stories is, for example, we've been pushing Facebook and all of the other tech bros to protect children within technology, right? To do the face recognition if a child has disappeared. I had a big fight with Facebook 10 years ago in the US, in Washington. They said they're going to sue me, and I said, please sue me because I want to bring all this evidence against you. And then they offered me a job instead of suing me, like an advisor job for Latin America. And I told them, no, I don't want your money. I just want you to comply with the laws in the rest of the world, not only the US. So the thing is, the big tech giants are not complying to laws anywhere else except in the countries that they really push them to, right? So it's like in the US for children, disappeared children, and in some countries in Europe. But most of the governments in the world have not been really aware, responsible enough, and prepare themselves in an intelligent way to stop these guys. So what happened was we pushed so bad against, so good, but so bad for him, against the owner, the CEO of Red Porn and Pornhub, that he was accused of illegal activities because they are just passing, and they have all this in their platforms, they have all this child pornography, right, and teen pornography, because it's what's selling now. So they are creating, with that, we demonstrated, they are creating children's addiction all over the world, like 13, 14-year-old boys are getting addicted to
So you mentioned the growth of teen pornography. This is pornography of teenagers having sex.
Yes.
targeted teenagers.
Teenagers, of course.
So teenagers are watching other teenagers.
If you're 13 or 14 years old and you have a phone because your parents are really responsible and are giving you technology that nobody once knows exactly how to handle, and you get pornography, you don't want to see a couple of old people, 30-year-old people having sex. You want to see people your age, near your age, doing it, so you learn, right? You learn. So that's what they're doing. So anyway, we sue them. So now what they did, because they were being persecuted not by the fiscal law, they moved to Barcelona. And now it's their paradise. So the CEO lives in Barcelona. He's doing his money laundering happily in Barcelona. So I'm after him in Barcelona, and he knows, so I can say it publicly. But so that's what we're doing. Journalists and NGOs are doing this job. And this shouldn't be our job. This should be the government's job. If every government in Europe right now united, truly united, to persecute these guys that are doing this, they would really transform organized the impact of organized crime in our children and in young women, so.
Now, I think we'll probably get some questions. So much more that we could talk about, but I'm keen to. Misha's got his hand up straight away, and then I'll come to you, and then to. I'll tell you what we could. I'll take a couple to start with. Misha, yours first, and then the lady in the next row. Do you want a microphone? Yeah, microphone here first, and then I'll take one from the.
Lydia, is it working? Yes, it is. Lydia, I know that you've just come back from Colombia and from Cali. It seems to me as though the situation, the levels of violence in Colombia are once again beginning to increase. Can you give us a brief outline of what the causes are and how concerned you are about the situation in Colombia?
And I'll take another question from the lady in the second row, just so we get as many in as possible.
Thank you so much. The big question I have, since the US has successfully, I would say, closed the borders down, so I would say you must have seen a tremendous reduction in transnational organized crime in terms of trafficking of human beings. We don't have that here in Europe. We don't have it in Africa, where it's in Africa even worse with harvesting of organs, and this spreads into the Middle East. What are some of your ideas on that?
And then I'll take one third one, and then I'll get you to answer. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, what are you working on right now?
Okay. Okay, well, let's start with Colombia. I mean, just to give a quick background for those of us, obviously, Colombia had a very long civil war and then a hard negotiated peace process. So what's it like there right now? What were you looking at in Cali in particular?
Well, one of the things that happen all over Latin America is like a lot of the guerrillas that were looking for a revolutionize their country and find freedom and all this. What happens is that they divided, and a big part of some of these guerrillas ended up being a part of organized crime, specifically the narco states and narco groups. And so the FARC, the guerrilla in Colombia, divided, right? With the peace process, part of it just renounce their arms, and then they join the process, the peace process with the government. But the other part didn't. Because it's so profitable to be in the drug business and human trafficking business, of course. So what we are seeing right now is that Petro, the president of Colombia, was talking about like putting more pressure into the other side of the FARC to come to this side, to the side of the good guys, and they didn't cut a deal with them. So they exploded a truck recently, and they are fighting the army again, and people are so scared that the war on drugs will come back again. But not only that, but the new component to this is Trump. Because before, it was Colombia, obviously with the help of the US, but with other kind of political help but not with attacks like Trump is doing. So I'm really worried that the cartels now in Colombia and in Mexico are buying the drones that are used in Russia against with the Russians against.
So the cartels are using the similar technology that we're seeing in the Russia-Ukraine against the army and against rival cartels.
Yes.
And they're very difficult to detect, aren't they?
Yes.
So,
and I think that Trump is going to take advantage of that because he's attacking the boats in Venezuela. What Trump wants, remember today, what Trump wants is to take over the oil in Venezuela. And he will say he's doing this for democracy. So remember Afghanistan and Iraq. But we are near, right? Mexico is near the US. It's not as difficult to deploy all these armies in Mexico and in the rest of the world. And that's Trump's plan apparently. And we should really worry about that because if he initiates this kind of war, the cartels will be the ones defending our countries, and that will be a whole nother chapter of history, war history.
That sort of brings us on to the next question, which is the closing of the US-Mexico border by Trump. I think you were sort of asking, of course, one of Trump's reasons was, given reasons was, I'm going to stop organized crime coming in.
He's not stopping organized crime. He's stopping immigration of people that are running from poverty and from violence. But he's not stopping the borders. I mean, you have millions and millions of addicted people in the US, and non-government, not Obama, none of them would dare to stop the drugs coming into the US. Can you imagine what 15 million people only in the border towns would do without their daily drugs? They would create a mayhem that nobody can even imagine. They need to be drugged. They need to be laying down in the streets anywhere in Arizona, in San Francisco, anywhere you go, in New York. If you take fentanyl and cocaine and heroin from them, they will make a big revolution and start killing people. I'm not joking. So they are not closing the doors to organized crime. It's still working as it was. And most of the money, you must remember this, I know we don't have time, but I have to recall this because I did an investigation 18 years ago with the money of El Chapo Guzman. All of his money that was already in the legal system was in Wells Fargo Bank. That's when I started investigating money laundering. And if one of the reasons the General District Attorney told me they couldn't take all the money, dirty money, from that bank is that it would go broke. And it's the same thing with other banks in the US that have all this money. And that's what Milei just said in Argentina. He said, oh, we're welcoming the drug dealers' money because, it's making our banks healthier, right? Right? Like the Yakuza did in Japan, the same thing. Now you have ex-Yakuzas, now they are CEOs of banks. Why not? So no, it's a big lie, and that's something that worries me. And then regarding the other thing about human trafficking, especially women and children trafficking in Africa and Europe, we need another conference for that. But it's really important point and something that really worries me.
Yeah, because I was going to get to that. Lydia's done a lot of tracking of how these networks work in Cambodia and Thailand, but as you say, we don't have time to go. But the other question was, what are you working on now?
Well, I just sent my most recent, you never say the last book, my most recent book to my publishers. It will be published at the beginning of next year. And I'm working on a book of essays on the advancement of women around the world and how we change the face of the world with our work regarding human rights and everything else, cultural, etc. And I'm still going into this investigation. I've been interviewing 13, 14-year-old boys in Spain now. I will go in the rest of Europe that are addicted to pornography, trying to understand what it's doing, the damage it's doing to their, psychological and physical health, but also how pornography gets to them, because we're trying to build a case to bring to the European Union and try to make them, force them to stop this big tech.
Regulate. Yeah.
Regulate.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes. So I'm going to take another couple of questions. So, I've got, okay, you person with the microphone there, you ask first.
Hola Lidia, bienvenida a Viena.
Gracias.
My name is Liliana, and the question is, what are the biggest changes in the last years you have noticed on how these trafficking groups operate nowadays versus 20 years ago, and which ones are you the most worried about?
Okay, can we take one question here?
Thank you so much. I would like to know your personal opinion about the worst children pedophiles. If you agree with the death penalty, I would love to see them all dead and not really in prison, because it doesn't really satisfy me when they're in prison, living maybe some of them that they are really rich and important and politicians, and they really have a good life there. So it doesn't satisfy me to know that they're in prison. I would like to see them dead, like drop dead.
Thank you. Who's has somebody got the mic? There's a lot of people's hands up. The lady with the microphone.
I recently read about a new law in Mexico that is now asking all hotels, Airbnb, and all these hospitality places to. It's still not passed, but it should be in the Senate now, and it's about registering also children or kids under 18 to see if they have any relationship, like family relationship with the people that they are staying. Otherwise, they will not be allowed to stay there, or should not. I would like to hear your opinion about this, and also if the current new judicial system would also have an impact or not related to this new law, if it would really be helpful, or it's just something political and not.
I'm afraid I'm being told we've got 4 minutes left and we have to finish on the so I can't take any more questions, but I'm sure Lydia will be happy to talk to you afterwards. But let's start with biggest changes really in the 20 years that you've been looking at this.
There are a lot of really, really good changes that have to do with people, like regular people around the world, understanding what child pornography is, recognizing it's a crime, and recognizing the human rights of children. The second one would be definitely that we are understanding. There's periodismo de niñez, journalism focused on children, but listening to women, to children, believing children, and not giving them a voice, but reinforcing their voices, so they are believed and their rights are protected. That's change, absolutely. And then on the other hand, the law, again, I think it's going to work. It will pass. It has a lot of pressure from all the NGOs, and it's in charge of CIPINA and one of the main NGOs in Mexico that is doing fantastic work on children's rights. So that's pretty good. And then on this case, I don't know, it's very complicated. In some countries, they do have death penalty. In some others, they don't. But I don't know, I can just tell you that Jan Sukarkuri, this guy that we caught, recently died in jail with, prostate cancer. So maybe you can celebrate that one. I don't know. I don't have anything else.
Well, look, Lydia Cacho, thank you. Well, thank you for being you. Thank you for your work on behalf of children, and thank you for our conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.